Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another What I'm Reading Right Now video here on the channel. This is the series where I talk about what I have been reading, what I'm currently reading, and what I'm going to be reading next. It was my off week last week, so we will be talking about 2 weeks worth of books. I am very pleased with how my reading has gone, particularly this week. I'm just feeling good. Did I get everything read that I wanted to? Absolutely not. But I'm feeling on top of things, and that's what's important. Let us start, as we usually do, with what I finished. First up, I finished Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. This shouldn't come as a surprise to you because I was reading it in the last video. I read this very quickly. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a really great duology. There will be a video coming out about it next Monday, if I am organised and my scheduling is good. I really like this duology overall. If you like Laini Taylor's world building, if you've already read any of her stuff, or I would say kind of new adult fantasy that is very romance focused, might also enjoy this. I'll save my full thoughts for that video, but that will be coming to you very soon. More rereading for my series over books. There's been a lot of it lately. I finished the audiobook of Children of Ruin by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is the second book in his Children of Time series, where the first book is giant sentient space spiders. The second book is more giant sentient, well, they're not giant, they're just sort of normal sized, I think, space cephalopods. Octopuses, octopodes, if you will. I really liked this. I think the audiobook is definitely the way to go for this series, at least for me. I thought it was great. There will be a video out in 3 Mondays' time, I think. Scheduling. On to some things that are not overbooked related. New releases. I've been reading a bunch of them. First up, I finished The Battle Drum by Sarah Ella Rifi. This is the sequel to The Final Strife in the Ending Fire trilogy, so we've got 1 book left. Second books are always difficult. I've talked about this quite a lot of times. Second books where book 1 had a particular structure to it, almost always, but not 100% of the time, that is a competition. In this case, it was a competition in book 1. Book 2 can therefore feel a little bit loosey-goosey, not sure where we are. I think that this book managed to balance it reasonably well, but I do say that knowing that this book took me a lot longer to read than book 1 did. Obviously, book 1 was a reread, not entirely comparable. Without spoiling book 1, we get to explore more of the world, which I thought was good. The character dynamics are tested, which I thought was good. And for me, I think my biggest takeaway was that book 1 really requires you to suspend belief about how blood works. Book 2, suspend belief about even more things. And that's fine. It's a fantasy book, we can do that. But maybe you need the warning to do it. Overall, it was a 4-star read for me. I thought it was a good time. I'm really excited for the third book. We'll see how the third book goes. After that, I finished Mortal Follies by Alexis Hall. This is an author I hadn't read before, but he has written a lot of romance. I, in theory, should have absolutely loved this because it features the curse tablets from the Temple of Sulis Minerva at Bath Spa, which, if you didn't know, is what I wrote my thesis on. So I loved that inclusion. I thought that was really great. And I liked a lot of the supernatural elements being brought in. The story itself is being narrated by Puck of Midsummer Night's Dream. The characters are interesting. It's a romance set in this period. However, for me, the trope of one person being less interested in pursuing the relationship for reasons, I'm trying not to spoil things, is not one that I love. And by that I mean you have one character who's very invested in a relationship and the other character who is, we know because we're reading a romance book, also interested in being involved in that relationship but has reasons not to be. But this character just keeps pushing. But that character doesn't know they're in a romance book. It's not my favourite, but I did like the book overall, and I would read another Alexis Hall romance. This just trope-wise wasn't for me, and I think for romance so often it's hitting the character dynamics that you enjoy in that particular book. If you love that kind of romantic pairing, might be for you. So in Mortal Follies, we have a character who is trying to live in society in some way, shape or form, but can't really go to balls and things because it suddenly appears she is cursed somehow. So a good portion of the book is them discovering who has cursed her, why they might have done that, and there's also this mysterious woman, the Duke of Annandale, who is a potential murderer, but also trying to help, but also the love interest. It's a whole thing. I'll probably make a review video on it because I have a lot of thoughts. After that, giving editing Judith a break on putting the covers on screen, I finished Gods of the Wyrdwood by R.J. Barker. I feel like I've talked about this in every single What I'm Reading Right Now video. For the last month, I really enjoyed this. It was a 4-star read, according to my Storygraph. I thought this was good. I think, as with most R.J. Barker books, it will be better on a reread now that I know what the overall flow of the book is. This is a spooky forest story. We have a kind of gruff forester, a man who can navigate the dangerous wood edge like no one else, and he has a dark backstory. It's very familiar in some of its storytelling tropes, but R.J. Barker just writes this really interesting adventure that he goes on exploring different parts of the wood and the consequences for this whole world that will sprout from the choices that he makes. Yes, I really liked this. I'm really interested in reading book 2. I'd like to make a review video for it. That's what I'm trying to do today, so if I'm going to do that, we have to move on. I finished another audiobook, which was The Blood Trials by N.E. Davenport. I do have this as an ebook, but I decided audiobook was the way to go. This is a new adult, I would describe as. I think it's technically adult fantasy. It's very YA adjacent in a lot of things. It really reminded me of Divergent in a lot of ways. It's not a direct copy of that, but just some of the storytelling beats felt very similar to me. We have a character who basically joins the army of this sci-fi world in order to discover who has murdered her grandfather and take revenge. She has hidden gifts. There are trials involved. It is a competition book. In a lot of ways, it did remind me a little bit of The Final Strife, that first Sarah El-Arifi book, but I think they are different in that one is a sci-fi. Yeah, this was okay. It was perfectly fine. I gave it 3.75 stars. I liked it. I don't think I would be dashing out to read the sequel immediately, but I probably would listen to it on audiobook again. Another 3.75 star read, but for very different reasons. I read The Saint of Bright Doors. This is a really interesting story that I suspect on a reread would go up in star rating. I'm just trying not to give everything 4 stars at the moment because it was getting a little bit silly. This is a fascinating story about a young man who has a divine destiny. He has been told all his life he's going to do one particular thing, and he ends up basically shunning that destiny and going to live in the city, where he discovers that divine destinies aren't all that unusual in this place. And alongside that, he ends up studying the bright doors, which are a thing in this city, where essentially, if a opaque door is closed for any period of time, it can become a bright door. Essentially means that it no longer opens, and it can't really be destroyed unless you destroy the wall all around it. And people study them, and they are interesting phenomena. And it's one of those books that if I tried to describe the plot, I'd have to just tell you the entire story of the book. It's one of those interesting storytelling pieces where you just have to let it take you, and it's a little bit of a thought experiment and a little bit of a character study all jumbled up together. I thought it was really good. I would like to read it again. I'd really like to do the audiobook of it because I just think that would fit better with my brain. I'm really interested to see the general feeling on this. This is one of those books where I'm excited for people I know to read it so I can see what they think as well. And also, this isn't what's important, but I just think this cover is absolutely stunning. Would I recommend reading it? I think if you're interested by the concept and you're okay with a book that takes a while to just carry you through, yes. And lastly, I finished my reread of Cemetery Boys. This is for Overbooked again. I have read this before. I really liked it the first time I read it. I liked it a lot this time around as well. I think it's a really readable YA book. It's got a lot of rereadability as well, I can now say. It's a lovely romance adventure kind of coming of age story. I very much enjoyed it. I've got a video coming out on this fairly soon, so I will talk about it then. Just know that I had a good time reading this and I would recommend it if you're into YA. I'm reading 2 things currently. I have an audiobook on the go of The Hobbit. I'm listening to the version that is narrated by Andy Serkis because he does the Gollum voice and I like that. Someone on my Discord was asking if I'm planning on reading the whole of the Lord of the Rings series. At the moment, my plan is no, but never say never. I might audiobook them when I finish the myriad other projects I've got going on at the moment, some of which require audiobook listening time. I'm about 30% of the way through. I have read The Hobbit before. I have my slightly older edition here. I'm really enjoying it. I like The Hobbit a lot. Let's keep going. The other thing I'm currently reading is a novella called Elder Race by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I have had this on my TBR for quite some time. I think I bought it in a sale at some point. And so far I'm finding it very interesting. It is one of those books that blends sci-fi and fantasy in a really interesting way. In this case, we have half of the perspective is from the 4th youngest sort of princess of this world who has sought out the mighty sorcerer in order to help with a problem, and the other half is the sorcerer, who is not really a sorcerer. He's an anthropologist alien, effectively, and obviously has access to technology that the people don't have access to. And something in the way that their translation software is working makes him speak in very archaic sentences. And it's really interesting look at how technology feels like magic to people who don't have that technology. And yeah, so far I'm enjoying it. I'm about 30% of the way through. 40%, I should say. I'm a liar. Still to read this week after I finish those two, I have The Wolf of Oren Yarrow, which I am rereading for Overbooked. This is a little bit of an experiment. I remember liking this the first time I read it, but not really understanding it, and the other two books are now out. So if I read this again and like it, I will be continuing on with the series, and if I don't, I'll probably end up unhauling it and just not making a video, so we'll see how I feel after I've read this. And then I need to get to my library book copy of Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo, because it's due back in the library in a couple of weeks, and I don't want to be that person that hangs on to their copies for too long so the people who want them can read them. I have added one new thing to my TBR in the last couple of weeks, which is pretty good going, I feel. It is Blade of Dream by Daniel Abraham, which is the sequel to Age of Ash. I think it's called Age of Ash. I should have the copy somewhere. This is the Kithamar series, where I read the first one and I thought it was fine, but the selling point of this series is that all the books are meant to intersect, like they happen simultaneously rather than being sequential, and I wanted to see what that was like. If I don't like book 2, I will just write off the series as not being for me. That's out in July, so I'll probably get to reading that towards the end of June. I'm going to do new releases up until the end of May. These are things that I have on my list. As ever, pub dates might be a little bit wrong. I'm just flagging things up so that you've seen them. Venom and Vow by A.M. Macklemore is out. I will be reading this because I've read all of their other stuff. I'm just going to wait until the end of the year because it might be something that I put on my Christmas list. I definitely need to order myself a copy of Painted Devils by Margaret Owen. This is the sequel to Little Thieves, which is just here. Yes, it is in frame. I really want to read this. I just haven't because I've been very strict about not buying books lately, but I think I can probably make an exception for this one. Battle Drum is out on the 25th of May. I already talked about that in this video, but in case you're wanting to order a copy, you can probably do that now. What have you been reading? What have you been up to? I would love to hear from you down in the comments below. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also follow me on social media. Come hang out on Discord where we have chill chats about books. I would like to say an enormous thank you to all the ghosts who haunt me over on Patreon. They support the channel and in return get early access to videos, bonus content, live streams, and more. If you'd like to join their number, that's linked below as well. Thank you so much to you for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. It's gonna be some bloopers now. Gotta get back in my slow speaking zone. This is the series where I talk about what I am reading. Nope. This is the series where I talk about, after that, I finished Mortal Follies by Alexis Hall. Yes?